All right, let's get straight into it. There's a critical safety and compliance update for all Airbus A350 operators. On October 27, 2025, EASA pushed out Airworthiness Directive 2025-0238. And in this breakdown, we're going to cover exactly what you need to know and, more importantly, what you need to do.
So why the urgency? Well, this quote right here, pulled directly from the EASA directive, tells you everything. This isn't some minor technicality. We're talking about a potential situation that could lead to reduced control of the aircraft in an emergency. That gets everyone's attention, and for good reason.
To make sure we cover all the bases, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with a quick overview, then dig into the root cause of the problem. We'll define exactly who is affected, detail the actions you need to take, and finally, we'll talk about the operational impact and your game plan.
Okay, first up, the big picture. Let's get a clear look at the directive's timeline and what it's fundamentally all about.
This whole thing moved pretty fast. The proposal went out for consultation back in June 2025, and just a few months later in October, the final AD was issued. Now, the date you really need to circle on your calendar is November 10, 2025. That's the effective date. That's when the compliance clock officially starts ticking.
So, let's get into the most important part, the why behind this AD. What exactly is the technical issue, and what's the risk it poses to flight safety?
Here's the core of the issue. The investigation found corrosion on a critical blade bearing inside the Ram Air Turbine, the RAT. And it's not random. It's being caused by humidity getting inside the unit while it's stowed away. A classic challenge, really, in aircraft design. You can see the whole chain reaction laid out here. It all starts with that tiny bit of moisture getting into the RAT. That humidity causes the blade bearing to corrode. Now that corrosion messes with the blade angle. And if the RAT is deployed in an emergency, it can spin way too fast, a dangerous overspeed condition.
And that overspeed, well, that leads directly to the ultimate unsafe condition EASA is trying to prevent, a partial or even total loss of electrical power from the RAT. The RAT is your last line of defense in some pretty serious emergencies, so if it fails, you could end up with what we saw at the beginning, reduced control of the plane.
Okay, now that we understand the risk, let's nail down exactly who and what this AD applies to. The scope here is actually very specific.
We're talking about the Airbus A350-941 and the A350-1041 models. And listen, this is really important. It covers all manufacturer serial numbers, so if you operate these types, this directive applies to you, no exception.
Now, this is where you need to pay close attention. The definition of an affected part is very precise. It's not just any RAT module with this part number. It's a unit that was retracted using a specific, now outdated maintenance procedure. And here's the kicker from the AD. If your maintenance records aren't clear about which procedure was used, you have to consider the part affected. This just screams how important meticulous record-keeping really is.
So based on that definition, EASA has split the fleet into two camps. Group 1 is pretty straightforward. These are the aircraft that right now have one of those affected parts installed. These are the planes that are going to need some work done. Group 2 aircraft are the ones that do not have an affected part. Maybe they have a newer RAT or one with a crystal clear maintenance history. But, and this is a big but, just because you're in Group 2 doesn't mean you can ignore this. There are still some specific rules that apply to everyone.
All right, let's get down to brass tacks. What do you actually have to do, and when does it need to be done by? This is the compliance mandate.
4 years. That's the big number you need to remember. This is the main deadline for operators with Group 1 aircraft. You have 4 years from the effective date to get that affected RAT module replaced with a serviceable one. This table lays it all out pretty clearly. For Group 1, you've got to replace the affected part within that 4-year window, and you have to follow the Airbus Service Bulletin to do it. And for both groups, Group 1 and 2, from the effective date onward, you are banned from using that old maintenance procedure, and you are absolutely prohibited from installing an affected part on any aircraft.
So, what does this all mean for your day-to-day operations? Let's talk about the real-world impact for your planning, maintenance, and management teams.
An ad like this requires some serious planning. You have to factor in aircraft downtime for the swap, you need a plan for getting your hands on serviceable parts, which means coordinating logistics, maintenance planning has to schedule it in, and of course, the money has to be budgeted. Oh, and if you lease your aircraft, you can bet this will be a big topic when it's time for lease return.
Take a second and think about your own fleet. A visual dashboard like this is pretty much a must-have for tracking compliance. How many of your A350s are in Group 1? How many have the work already on the books? And how many are good to go?
Keeping tabs on this is the only way you'll meet that 4-year deadline without a mad scramble at the end.
And that brings us to the home stretch. Let's wrap this up with a clear action plan and some final instructions to make sure we're all on the same page.
So, at the end of the day, it all boils down to this one simple rule going forward. You are permitted to install a serviceable part. You are strictly prohibited from installing an affected part, that specific part number with that specific maintenance history, onto any A350, period.
This is the big question you need to take back to the office. Is everybody talking to each other? Is your CAMO team coordinated with maintenance planning? Does logistics have a procurement strategy? Is management aware of the budget and the timeline? This has to be a unified effort, or things will fall through the cracks.
And finally, look, while this breakdown gives you a solid overview, the official documents are your Bible. They are the ultimate source of truth. All actions have to be done according to EASA AD 2025-0238 and the Airbus Service Bulletin it references. Make sure your teams have these documents and that they follow them to the letter.